We are currently living through the most dangerous diplomatic illusion in human history. Right now, the entire global economy is resting on a knife edge. It is a multi-billion-dollar geopolitical lie so intensely fragile that a single rogue missile, one miscalculated flight path, or a single mistranslated press release could instantly ignite World War III. The geopolitics behind this are completely surreal. Out in the Pacific sits an island. For all practical purposes, it functions entirely as an independent nation. It has its own fiercely autonomous, democratically elected president. It prints its own currency, the new Taiwan dollar. It issues its own passports, honored at border checkpoints worldwide. It even fields a brutal, battle-ready military stacked with advanced stealth warships, fighter jets, and indigenous missile systems. But the real trigger for global conflict isn't just the land, it's what's built on it. This island controls the absolute crown jewel of modern human technology, TSMC. TSMC is a single semiconductor company responsible for manufacturing over 90% of the world's most advanced microchips. Let that sink in, 90%. If this one island goes dark, modern civilization grinds to a halt. Your smartphone, your car, advanced military satellites, and the global financial infrastructure will literally collapse overnight.
Is that what you're referring to, and what does that mean in this context?
Well, it means in terms of our standing on Taiwan as a province of China.
By every single definition of modern political science, this place is an independent nation. Yet, if you ask the United Nations, they will tell you it does not exist. If you check an official world map printed in Washington, London, or Tokyo, you will not find its embassy listed. If it wants to compete in the Olympic Games, its athletes cannot carry their own flag or sing their national anthem. They must march under the synthetic, compromised banner of Chinese Taipei. Why? Because of 4 words that dictate the foreign policy of the world's 2 greatest superpowers.
One China
the
policy.
One China policy.
That the One China policy has been widely recognized by the international community. Adhering to the One China policy is the important political basis and precondition for China to develop a relationship with other countries.
To Beijing, there is only one China, and Taiwan is a rebellious province that must be reintegrated by peaceful means if possible, by devastating military force if necessary. To Washington, there is an intentional, highly calculated strategic ambiguity and acknowledgement of Beijing's claim, matched with a quiet multi-billion-dollar commitment to keep Taiwan armed to the teeth. And to the people living in Taipei, it is a daily tightrope walk between freedom and total annihilation. But how did we get here? How can a piece of land be completely self-governing, possess a GDP larger than most European nations, and yet be diplomatically invisible? How did the world agree to look at 2 very real, hyper-armed states and collectively whisper, there is only one? To understand the terrifying stakes of the modern cross-strait crisis, we have to unlock a century-old blood feud. We have to understand a story of betrayal, ideological fanaticism, secret Cold War alliances, and the brutal civil war that never actually ended.
上周秦汉，上周秦汉，隋唐宋，隋唐宋，元明清 Republic， 元明清 Republic， Mao Zedong, Mao Zedong.
So if you sing this song once a day, you will always remember the sequence of Chinese dynasties. It works, it's guaranteed.
Modern China looks like an unstoppable monolith today, but its actual foundation was born out of pure, unadulterated chaos. To even grasp why the One China policy exists right now, you have to look back at a massive historical train wreck. For literally 2,000 years, imperial dynasties ran the show. But in 1911, the final empire, the Qing Dynasty, completely disintegrated. It couldn't handle the pressure of internal rebellions and foreign powers bleeding the country dry. What rose out of that wreckage was a new government, the Republic of China, or the ROC, except the new republic was completely powerless to stop the bleeding. The entire country instantly fractured. China became this violent, chaotic jigsaw puzzle of territories ruled by independent, brutal warlords. And right inside that power vacuum, a massive ideological war exploded. 2 men stepped up with completely opposite visions for the future, sparking a rivalry that turned them into bitter mortal enemies. First up was Chiang Kai-shek. He took the reins of the Nationalist Party, which you probably know as the Kuomintang or KMT. Chiang didn't want a communist state. His goal was a modernized, unified capitalist China, and he planned to build it using ruthless, centralized military power. Second, there was Mao Zedong, a brilliant, ruthless, ideological strategist who rallied the forgotten masses of the Chinese countryside to form the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. Mao's vision was a total Marxist-Leninist peasant revolution that would burn the old order to the ground. By 1927, the uneasy alliance between these two factions shattered completely. A savage, no-quarter-given Chinese civil war erupted across the mainland. For 10 brutal years, the nationalists and communists slaughtered each other across China's heartland. But then, history threw a catastrophic wild card into the deck. In 1937, Imperial Japan launched a full-scale, devastating invasion of the Chinese mainland. Faced with total extermination by an external enemy, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong were forced to call an uneasy truce. They paused their civil war to fight the Japanese invaders. This conflict became the Asian theater of World War II, costing China an estimated 15 to 20 million lives. When World War II ended with the surrender of Japan in 1945, the external threat vanished and the blood feud resumed instantly. But the dynamic had flipped. Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist armies were completely exhausted, corrupted by years of conventional warfare and economic collapse. Mao's communist guerrillas, however, were fresh, highly motivated, and rapidly capturing the hearts and minds of the starving rural population. By 1949, the collapse of the nationalist government was absolute. Mao's Red Army swept across the mainland like an unstoppable tidal wave, capturing city after city: Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing. In December of 1949, realizing he had lost the mainland, Chiang Kai-shek made a desperate final gamble. He gathered the remnants of his government, his remaining loyalist soldiers, the country's entire gold reserves, and irreplaceable imperial treasures from the Forbidden City. Along with 2 million refugees, they fled across the ocean to the island of Taiwan, then known to the Western world as Formosa. On October 1, 1949, standing atop the gates of the Forbidden City in Beijing, Mao Zedong raised the red flag and declared the birth of a new nation, the People's Republic of China, PRC.
China firmly opposes official exchanges between the United States and China's Taiwan region, and firmly opposes U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. This position is consistent, clear, and resolute.
This is the foundational moment that created the modern crisis. The Chinese Civil War did not end with a peace treaty. It simply froze along the Taiwan Strait. Now, look closely at the setup, because this is where the mind-bending diplomatic puzzle begins. In Beijing, Mao Zedong claimed his communist government, the PRC, was the sole legitimate ruler of all of China, including Taiwan. In Taipei, Chiang Kai-shek insisted his nationalist government, the ROC, was still the sole legitimate ruler of all of China, including the mainland they had just lost. Both men fiercely agreed on exactly one thing: there is only one China. They just violently disagreed on who held the right to rule it. In 1950, Mao Zedong was preparing a massive amphibious invasion fleet to cross the strait and wipe out Chiang Kai-shek once and for all. Taiwan was defenseless, abandoned by an American government that saw Chiang as a corrupt losing bet. It looked like the Republic of China was about to be erased from history. But once again, global conflict rewrote the script. In June of 1950, the Korean War erupted. Suddenly, the United States saw communist expansion in Asia not as a localized civil war, but as a direct global threat. U.S. President Harry Truman instantly reversed American policy. He ordered the U.S. Navy's formidable 7th Fleet into the Taiwan Strait, drawing a hard line in the water. Truman's message to Mao was unmistakable: if you attack Taiwan, you go to war with the United States. For the next 2 decades, the island of Taiwan became an indispensable, heavily fortified Western fortress in the global war against communism. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, the international community backed Chiang Kai-shek. Even though the PRC ruled over hundreds of millions of people on the mainland, It was the tiny island government in Taipei that held China's seat and veto power at the United Nations Security Council. To the Western world, the mainland was an illegitimate, unrecognized zone. The tiny island was China. But geopolitics is a game of cold, ruthless pragmatism, and alliances are written in sand. By the turn of the 1970s, a massive rift opened up between the Soviet Union and Communist China. They were pointing nuclear weapons at each other along their shared border. In Washington, US President Richard Nixon and his brilliant calculating national security advisor Henry Kissinger saw a once-in-a-generation opportunity to alter the balance of power. They realized that if they split China away from the Soviet Union, they could effectively win the Cold War. But Beijing's price for this alliance was absolute and non-negotiable. The United States had to ditch Taiwan. The betrayal was swift and devastating. In 1971, the United Nations passed Resolution 2758, officially expelling the Republic of China, Taiwan, and recognizing the People's Republic of China as the sole legitimate representative of China to the UN. Then came the definitive diplomatic hammer blow. On January 1, 1979, the United States officially severed all formal diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Washington closed its embassy in Taipei, terminated its mutual defense treaty, and officially recognized Beijing as the sole legal government of China. But how did the US abandon its loyal ally without letting Beijing simply invade it? They did it through an extraordinary, hyper-engineered feat of diplomatic word games. Pay close attention here, because this linguistic technicality is what keeps the peace today. There was a massive, critical difference between Beijing's One China principle and Washington's One China policy. For decades, this One China diplomatic fiction worked, because both sides still claimed they were the true rulers of the same homeland. But as the 20th century drew to a close, a quiet, monumental shift occurred on the island of Taiwan that changed the calculus forever. When Chiang Kai-shek ruled Taiwan, it wasn't a free country. It was a brutal, single-party military dictatorship under martial law, a dark era known as the White Terror. Tens of thousands of Taiwanese dissidents were imprisoned, tortured, or executed for opposing the KMT. But in the late 1980s and 1990s, Taiwan did something extraordinary. It didn't collapse, it evolved. Driven by an educated, courageous populace and a booming high-tech economy, Taiwan dismantled its dictatorship and transformed into one of the most vibrant, progressive, and free democracies in all of Asia. This democratic awakening triggered an irreversible identity crisis. When Chiang Kai-shek's old guard fled to the island in 1949, they were homesick mainlander soldiers who dreamed of retaking their villages in Sichuan or Honan. But today, decades later, the vast majority of Taiwan's 23 million citizens have never set foot in mainland China. They were born on the island. They grew up with free speech, an uncensored internet, and democratic voting booths. According to long-term demographic data tracking, in the early 1990s, a huge portion of the population identified as both Chinese and Taiwanese. But today, the overwhelming majority of the population, especially the youth, identify strictly as Taiwanese. They don't want to conquer Beijing. They don't care about the old Civil War feud. They just want to be left alone to run their own peaceful island democracy. We have reached the modern flashpoint. The delicate diplomatic illusion that maintained peace for half a century is rapidly dissolving, pushing the world closer to a major superpower conflict than at any point since the Cuban Missile Crisis. On one side of the strait stands Xi Jinping, the most powerful, centralized leader of mainland China since Mao Zedong. Xi has made the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation the absolute core pillar of his historical legacy. And to the Chinese Communist Party, that rejuvenation is completely impossible without what they called the sacred reunification of Taiwan with the motherland. On the other side of the strait, Taiwan's political landscape has completely transformed. The current leadership in Taipei, backed by a population that watches the erosion of freedoms in places like Hong Kong with absolute horror, firmly rejects the 1992 consensus. They maintain a clear stance. Taiwan is already an independent, sovereign country, and it does not need to declare independence because you cannot declare something you already are. If Beijing decides to enforce its One China principle to a total naval and aerial blockade or a massive amphibious invasion, the global economic fallout would be immediate and catastrophic. This isn't just about geopolitics. It's about the tangible physical reality of the technology in your pocket. As we mentioned earlier, Taiwan is home to TSMC. They don't just make chips for laptops. They make the custom specialized silicon that runs the guidance systems of American F-35 fighter jets, the servers powering the global artificial intelligence revolution, and the data HUDs of every major multinational bank. The island's total dominance over the semiconductor supply chain is often called its silicon shield. It forces the United States and the Western world to care about its survival, because the collapse of Taiwan means the immediate collapse of modern technological civilization. This reality leaves the United States trapped in an incredibly high-stakes geopolitical dilemma. If the United States steps back and allows Beijing to absorb Taiwan by force, the American Global Alliance Network breaks apart in an instant. America's key regional allies like Japan and South Korea would lose all faith in the US nuclear umbrella and might feel compelled to develop their own nuclear weapons for survival. Furthermore, China would instantly seize control of the first island chain, a critical geographic barrier. This would give the Chinese military total control over the world's most vital shipping lanes and allow them to project unchecked naval power directly into the open Pacific Ocean, ending American maritime hegemony. But if the US military intervenes directly to defend Taiwan, it means a direct, kinetic, high-intensity war between two nuclear-armed superpowers. We are talking about carrier groups being sunk on live television, satellite networks being blasted out of orbit, and the very real, terrifying risk of rapid escalation toward a strategic nuclear exchange. The story of One China is not just a story of legal communiques, military capabilities, or complex diplomatic word games. It is a story about the profound tension between historical narrative and human reality. To the historians and politicians in Beijing, China is a grand civilizational entity whose ancient continuity was broken by a century of foreign humiliation and domestic division. To them, reclaiming Taiwan is the final mandatory chapter in a long historic march toward national redemption. For over 70 years, the world's greatest diplomatic illusion has successfully prevented a catastrophic war. It did so by allowing everyone involved to believe whatever version of reality made them comfortable. It let Beijing say there is only one China, it let Taiwan live out its independence in practice, and it let the West trade with both sides while avoiding a global conflict. The world can pretend there is only one China for as long as it wants, but out here in the real world, across 100 miles of dark ocean water, two completely different worlds continue to stare each other down. And how long that illusion can hold is the defining question of our century.